Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Can I have a motion for approval of the present agenda? All in favor? So we're about to move into the first of two public comment periods. As a reminder from the last meeting, or for the first time for anyone that wasn't here last time, this comment period is for items on today's agenda only. So if you see an agenda item on our agenda and there's copies up at this table up there and over there, and you'd like to speak specifically about one of those agenda items, you can sign your name on the sheet up at the front and we'll give you 3 minutes to speak. If you have another issue pertaining to the school or the school community that you'd like to talk about, that'll have to wait for the second public comment period, which will be towards the end of the meeting. So with that, oh, and if you're online, there's a little hand near the bottom of your screen that says raise hand. If you click raise hand, we will be able to see your digital hand. If you do click the button, just leave your digital hand up, and we'll get to you at some point during the meeting. Do we have any digital hands? We have one. Okay, while that's happening, if there's anyone that would like to speak about today's agenda here in the room, the sign-up sheet's right there. In the meantime, we'll go promote whoever is online here.
So Zena Sanchez, I'm going to promote you to speak.
Is my mic still on?
Yep.
Zena, just make sure that you address which agenda item you're speaking about today. If it's not on the agenda, it'll have to wait.
Zena, if you unmute your microphone, you can go ahead and speak.
Hello?
Oh,
Are we good?
Someplace.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hold on, Zena. We just need to turn up your volume so everyone can hear you. I think maybe I heard her out of up there.
Oh, hang on a second. Something changed.
I can hear you guys good.
Hang on, Zena. We can bear. Let me just make sure.
I just want to make sure the whole room will be able to hear you.
Okay.
Zena, can you speak one more time?
Sure. Can you hear me?
It's coming.
How is this?
Little tech challenge on our end.
Oh, go ahead.
Hello?
There we go.
We're good?
We
Okay. Hello. So I want to speak about the Superintendent's Report. So that really doesn't have any content. There's nothing in it. There's no context. So there's really no way that we could comment on it. So considering that it's been changed the way that we're doing things, I would expect that there would be more content so that we could actually comment. And then just also on that note, I don't really understand.
We actually need to stop her.
Why?
Can you just stop her so it's not? So
Hello?
So I think we just need to mute one of the mics. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to. Okay. You're right, there's no content on the superintendent report. It's for the superintendent to report on issues that occurred in the school this week. This isn't an item available for public comment. It's nothing we're voting on. You will have an opportunity to listen to the report, and at the end of the meeting, you can comment on it. So if you don't have a specific agenda item, we're just going to move on.
No, that is a specific
Okay,
item
we're
agenda.
going to wrap it up. We're going to move on.
Wow.
So,
Yeah,
do we have anyone here in the room? Okay. So there will be an open public comment period at the end of the meeting. Until then, we're going to move on into board comment. So, does anyone on the board have anything that they want to speak about regarding school since we last met? Okay. So we're going to go into the student representative report from Mia Port.
Okay, so starting off on a light note, the student government is trying to put together a community service blood drive to bring to our school since there is a blood shortage. So that's awesome that we're getting students involved in that. We are working on concerns from the suggestion box regarding like the food waste situation. So we'll keep you guys updated on that. And we are also working on bringing back student tutoring for either this year or next year, because we think that's really important, especially with a lot of COVID-19 learning loss that happened. And then from a student perspective, senior student, Capstones we finished, and the senior team did very well this year, especially with the into the English classroom transition. We most of us think that they did an awesome job with that. And then school safety, regarding that, I sent out a survey and I got feedback and I collected data from the student body. So I will be discussing that further with I already discussed it with Mr. Thorson, but I'll be discussing it further with Dr. D'Angelo, and then I can show some of the data collected to everyone. So that's really exciting that we're moving forward with that, and hopefully we can get something on the ground running. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns?
No?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Okay, so we are now into the superintendent report section. The first item is the PreK feasibility study presentation. Do we have Dr. Roots presenting, or?
We do. And then the way we have the agenda set up, I will be making some updates to the board, and then the last part of the superintendent's presentation will be part one of the budget. We're going to turn it over to Mr. Chuddy and his team. So Dr. Rood, I'd like to turn this over to you. And in the meantime, I'm going to share out her PowerPoint presentation. So bear with me for just a second.
So while that's coming up, I just wanted to thank Kate Gerard and also our leadership team, especially Christian Reno and Brett Frotran, for helping with this presentation. This is a work in progress. We don't have all the answers, but what we did want to do is at least present the point of research in terms of where we're at, so that we consider this sort of part one of a continued conversation. So there, I think as many of my presentations, there's a lot of data in here to digest. So my recommendation, some things we're going to go through pretty quickly, would be to really take this as step one and think of what further questions you have regarding pre-K, and then we'll wrap the answers into the second presentation that we put together. Good. Okay, so this is a quick agenda of some of the topics that I want to cover, some of our objectives to define UPK and TPK, the alphabet soup that we have, go over some population trends that we've had for pre-K and as well as kindergarten, review in our aspect what the components of the feasibility study are in terms of review of research, informant surveys, talk a little bit about the SED funding that's available, some recommendations and requirements, and then really looking to next steps. Okay, so the first thing here is I always like to start with objectives in terms of what it is we're trying to do. And first and foremost, that is to serve the Chatham community. We are looking to identify and operationalize the research-based empirically proven elements of high quality, developmentally appropriate preschool programs to include curriculum, scheduling, staffing, provision of special support services, and logistics through literature review. In other words, looking to research. For our practice, we want to summarize the current preschool programs available in Chatham and its boundaries to include facilities, access, capacity, fees, transportation, and wraparound care through the program analysis. We're looking to identify options for revising the current opportunities for family members living in our boundaries to access high quality preschool. We're looking to identify the models that are the most efficient and to implement a quality universal pre-K program. And the end goal is really to produce a brief or a report for you all. So this is the start of that conversation. So a couple definitions here. Right now at Chatham, we have targeted pre-K, and what that means, so there's two different, for this conversation today, there'll be two different types of preschool that we're talking about, and one is targeted and one is universal. And targeted pre-K, we're talking about selecting students, and they're based on whether they're they have educational needs or they're economically disadvantaged. That allows us to target needs specifically to those who need it the most. Universal pre-K is selected on a random basis. So there is still, you still screen to get in order for universal pre-K, but it doesn't have the same requirements. Universal pre-K is, there is funding that's associated with that from NYSED. The targeted pre-K, there is not. Okay, so there's going to be a bunch of slides here that I just want to put together some trend data for you. So this is our 5-year pre-K enrollment numbers. So you can see from 2017 all the way to current day. This is targeted. So you're going to see the numbers remains fairly consistent. You see the little dip right with COVID. We're still in COVID, but last year with the space requirements. So if we can go to the next slide. I wanted to show some of the demographics here in terms of race of what it's looking like over the course of the years. You can keep going. And this is our English language learners, our economically disadvantaged, and our students with disabilities. So you can get a sense of the subgroups of what they look like. And again, I realize we're just flashing these through, but it's just when I make some comments later, I want you to understand where I'm basing those comments on. And for those of you who just prefer a spreadsheet and everything in one place, that's for you. You can flip to the next slide. All right, so now let's take a look at our kindergarten enrollment numbers. So if you noticed in our earlier slide, our TPK is really kind of hovering around 15 students. Our enrollments really went from around 80 to 90, and right now we're hovering just about 50. So that's, if we were to think about if every person, if this trend were to continue, that if we wanted to service every 4-year-old pre-K and Chatham, we'd be looking at roughly 50 students. And it's not everyone always wants to participate in UPK or pre-K. Here's the demographics of our kindergarten class from 2017 to current. and again, our subgroups. Go to the next slide. And for those of you who prefer the not the pretty pictures and colors. All right, so putting these two side by side, we're really talking about how many students we can service and why we're servicing them. That targeted model, again, we're at about 15 students. This is solely funded, and this is all based on my understandings of working collaboratively in the district, working with NYSED, and so if any of the administrators hear me say something wrong, please correct me. So this is funded by Chatham, which affords us to run the program how we want to run it, essentially. If we go to a universal model, again, you can see that there's the potential to accommodate more students in this model. However, it is highly prescribed. If we are to take the funds from NYSED, and we'll go over some of the prescriptive measures that we need to comply by. All right, so you know that I have a panache for research. This is when you link, there's a link on the literature. So if you're curious in terms of some of the literature that we looked at, you certainly can look at that. There's some references in the end of the deck, but you can see a sample of the starts of a literature review. But these are just some of the things in terms of why pre-K is good for Chatham. So many of these things are not unknown to us, but in terms of boosting later achievement, reducing negative effects of poverty, so it goes on and on. But I just wanted to show you and link it to where it's coming from on the research. So a critical component of this is our surveys, and this is not done yet. This is something that we're in the process of building right now, but this is we're talking about surveys and potentially focus groups with our community to understand what the community's needs are when it comes to pre-K. So I gave just a little sample here of what it could look like. But we would like to distribute this survey this spring to get a sense of, together with the survey and with our census numbers, to get a sense of what our potential population could look like, and also what the needs are.
That would just be bulk mail to zip codes. How would you get that out to people if they haven't registered yet?
Not sure yet.
Okay.
I think part of it would be we have a pre-enrollment database
Right.
through our student information system. So one aspect would be those that currently have siblings within the district. And then I think through public information, we're going to have to distribute the survey and ask people share it with those who might be interested or qualify.
Okay, thanks.
I think we can think about some more old school methods too of how we reach community members. That goes, what I don't want to just have as a link on the website, right? Because you're not going to know to get there. I think ultimately we'd like to collect it digitally, but how that word gets out is another piece to this. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about SED funding. So across the state, there's about $90 million that is awarded for non-competitive grants. And there's a priority for districts who've not yet received funding for UPK, and we qualify for that. There's an additional $15 million that is a competitive RFP process, but we were eligible for it this year. We have to see the passing of the budget to see if we can apply for additional funds. That would essentially give us money beyond 20 seats if we are awarded. So the number that we have right now is about 108K, and that affords us 20 seats. That's what we were awarded for this year. We anticipate that it'll remain the same for next year. I gave you a sense of what some of the allowable expenses are. It's what you would expect. The thing that you may not notice in there is the transportation services. Our thoughts are to capitalize our existing bus runs, but we can use some of this money to offset transportation costs, which right now with our UPK, we can't do that. Okay, so just to review eligibility, a child must be 4 years old by December 1st, or be able to enter kindergarten the following year. This is again the criteria for that's coming from NYSED. Some of the staffing parameters. You can have a full day or a half day, 5 days a week, but you do have to have 180 school days, up to 18 students with 1 teacher and 1 paraprofessional, and 20 students with 1 teacher and 2 paraprofessionals, and the teachers must have the appropriate certification. We are making some assumptions in this model that we're leaning towards exploring a full day model rather than a half day model. One, to utilize bus routes, our current bus routes. They can ride the bus, and as long as they're 4, and that we're working with Josh too to make sure that they, they're tall enough and they weigh enough. Otherwise, they need a booster seat. And the research shows that there's a greater impact with a full day versus half day. Okay, so here's a bunch of to be determines for the financial. As I mentioned, we're looking at about 108,000 per year for this. The competitive funding, we're still waiting to see if we can apply for that. That is if we were to move forward in a UPK direction. Some of the things to consider for cost per the classroom would be the teacher plus the paraprofessionals, depending on the numbers. The transportation impact, there should be minimal impact on our transportation, but I would expect there's going to be some. Thinking about remodeling, some minor remodeling and refurnishing for our little kiddos, and then also having some solid numbers in terms of the local budget impact for us here. We do have a shrinking kindergarten class coming in. That does, while we're still keeping class sizes small, there's some consideration for consolidating a section of kindergarten and allocating one of those sections. This is just in our conversations, not saying this is a done deal. That if we can consolidate down a section and open up a pre-K section without having an impact on staff. Okay, there's a piece of this, I'll try to make this as simple as possible. It's a little complicated, but a component of this is that we must collaborate with community organizations that operate pre-K currently. As I researched some history in terms of UPK at Chatham, one of the concerns was that, we don't want to put anyone else out of business that's in the community. But as we're seeing less and less pre-K within Chatham and how we can best service our students, the idea is that if we start a pre-K here, that if there's a pre-K in the community that has holds to the same standards that we're held to, that they get 10%, they get a portion of the funding. If there's no one, if there's no one in the community, so you can see the list here is that the linked list will show on some pre-Ks and that are registered, and we're kind of slim pickings right now. So if there's nobody in the community that's offering a pre-K that holds the same standards as UPK, we can apply for a variance, and then that 10% stays within district. So curriculum, this is up here just to show that there are some requirements around curriculum for our young kiddos. And I listed those components here. Much of this is aligned with what we are currently doing, but just to say that there are different models out there for pre-K. There's play-based, and so when we go into a UPK, we have to be very careful that we're aligned with NYSED, and that it's part of a continuum that flows into our frankly, like our next gen standards. Go to the next slide. Okay, so I tried to just do a little bit of action steps here to get a sense of what this process could look like. That the first step of this, and this isn't anything that would happen tonight, right? This is really looking, once we have community surveys and we have some more conversation with the leadership team, and coming to the board, and should the board say we'd like to move forward with a universal pre-K, that recommendation first needs to come from the board. From that point, we try to establish a start date for it. That's not to say that those things could go hand in hand, but the board approval needs to come first. From there, we can design our program based on NYSED parameters, establish our collaborations. Some of this language is in here because you can also contract with outside providers to do this work. That is not our intention. We'd like to keep this in-house. We'd like to develop our own people and have them be part of our Chatham family. Recruit our children. Then it goes into the SED application approval. If you notice that there's some pieces here that is, I think, very different than other funding mechanisms, and that is it's almost an assurance that you will get the funding as long as you comply with what they're asking you to do. So then we talk about the selection and placement of children. Even though it's universal pre-K, there are screenings for all of the kids. And then we talk about implementation and monitoring.
Lisa, just for a point of clarification, if we are not able to provide the maximum amount of capacity to meet the need, then it would require us to do a lottery system, correct?
It is. There, not shockingly, there is some conflicting regulation on this. But yes, the short of it is that if there's not enough spaces, then we have to go to a lottery. For you, PK, what we've had a lot of questions going back and forth with NYSED, and one of the things that's not clear is whether or not we could operate a UPK and a TPK. I think that I have some concerns about that, just in terms of philosophically about doing that, because I think you're essentially segregating kids. But so in terms of the regulations, I'm not sure if we can run both. So that's to be answered by NYSED. Now, the intention would be is if we went into a UPK model, that we would have a heterogeneous mix of kids, and we would provide supports just like we would in kindergarten or first grade. And then but you would just have a more dynamic mix of students, and you'd be servicing more of your population. So some of the question becomes, how many do we have the space? Do we have the staff? Can we work within the parameters with minimal budget impact to service our existing population in the community? And we're pretty darn close to that.
Okay. I see that there's a couple more pages here, but just on some technical questions before you go forward. When you talk about other programs that might be available to the community or serve the community, this does not include all OCFS regulated group childcare, right? They have to meet some extra. I know that Head Start, for example, meets extra NYSED standards, right?
Right.
Do you know? Do the existing programs around here meet any of those requirements, or we don't know?
I put the ones that I could find on the slide, and it doesn't look like there's many. But that we haven't.
Is that like an inquiry out to OCFS to? We
haven't had an exhaustive search with it yet. I know that we're still in that research process, so we have we've got a date to speak. We've had some email communication back and forth with NYSED, but we just have to see what our due diligence is to how deep we have to research within the community. Just going from sort of like a gut level answer, which may not be great, is that I would think if they're not registered with NYSED as a pre-K, then they're not going to constitute one that would be eligible for the 10%.
Okay. This for staffing, you talked about a couple different scenarios here. The ratios, these are the same for pre-K 4 and kindergarten, or is it a different rubric? It's different?
I think we're actually lower for kindergarten. I'm going to look to Kristen on that one.
Okay.
Currently, we have between 15 and 16 students in each class, and we have a 4.5-hour TA that is in each classroom.
Okay.
Our pre-K class currently has 12 students and a full-time teaching assistant.
So if we staffed a pre-K 4 classroom, that's just basically the same certification as a kindergarten teacher, right? That pre-K
Yes.
through 2.
Well, it's birth through, yes. Yes.
There's multiple certifications, but I believe that they all go through kindergarten. Yes.
Oh, so there's some that end at kindergarten. It would be,
I think
There's
they're K through
pre-K 2. There's 1-5. There's 1-2. There's multiple.
okay, so but it's the pre-K through 2 probably.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's the only thing that came up, and I was afraid I was going to lose those questions. But
Okay.
anyone else on technical questions before we?
It was about the lottery that you mentioned. And we have 20 seats, is that correct? 20, we could take 20?
Well, so for right now, we finance our own pre-K, right? So in theory, right, we've got between 15 and 20. If we added an additional one, then we could be upwards of 30 to 40.
My question was, if we had a lottery.
Yep.
The targeted and the universal would be together, but with a lottery, could there possibly be a targeted child not get in?
So, no.
Really?
If you go for, and Kate and I were looking at the regulations today about this, that if it's a universal model, you can't sort of elevate a student who has additional need above someone else. It's a universal model. So, and I think another component to this too is part of the premise of this is having access to education, right? So we're thinking about our students with special needs, that we want them in classroom spaces that are least restrictive. So that's why you're seeing that universal pre-K model. Like, so you're seeing students with multiple abilities in the room. So it's philosophically, this is different than what we do, and arguably we as a leadership team are not, we haven't had really robust conversations about this because we've been operationally challenged this year. So we tried to put some due diligence into putting this together, but I will say that we just started our conversations about, I think that pre-K is such an important piece because that's day one of starting our Chatham model, and we want to make sure that there's continuity from pre-K through graduation. So we're not coming to you at this point with a recommendation. We're coming to you with, this is what we're wrestling with, and this is what a potential timeline could look like, and also to solicit community feedback in that process as well.
Thank you. I was just concerned about the TP guys.
I guess I have similar questions, being that this is kind of like my forte since I did K-1-2 for 35 years. So it is, if let's say conceivably we go to UPK and we have a lottery, and some of those kids that would have definitely been brought into our present program aren't included, will we be able to find some other locations for them to get, like at story time or something like that, to get their needs met?
I think that in our design, we don't want that to happen, right? I think that as we move forward and think about a potential expansion with pre-K, we want to think about the what ifs, and that if we're going, we have very specific reasons that we have a targeted pre-K right now. And we want to make sure that if we were to go to UPK, that if we had, say that there were 4 extra students, right, and that would put us into a lottery situation, I think we'd want to have some contingency plans for what we could do in that scenario. So what we don't have firm numbers on, which makes this a little nebulous, is we don't have our census, we don't have complete census numbers at this point. And we also need to get the surveys back from community, right? So that if we can get a sense for extreme interest, or people who are saying we are just not interested and we feel like we could go to a UPK model and still adequately service our students that have the highest needs, I think that's the best case scenario. I don't think any of us would feel comfortable in a situation where we were saying no to someone who had extreme need. I just want to, on this slide, can you go back one slide? Because Matt Fish brought this forth, and what I loved about this is, you know, our board members who are actively, you know, contributing to the conversation. So this was an article from NPR, and just put some highlights in here about it, but some commentary. The gist of it really is just being mindful in your design. And that putting in another pre-K doesn't mean it's going to automatically have benefits. So some of the things they were talking about was having a large time with transition, right? That there's little bodies in a big school trying to get places. And if you look at a pre-K that might be offsite, they're really built for little bodies. They're meant for our little munchkins. So I think these are things that we can overcome, but they're things that we definitely want to be mindful of in designing further programs. Okay, so we want to put together just a little bit of a hypothetical plan in terms of what we're kicking around, that it would potentially be located at MED, that it would be full day, students ages 4+. We're looking at potentially 2 to 3 classrooms, depending on interest. And if we can accommodate the population, we'd be looking to potentially change from a targeted pre-K to a universal pre-K. Now, here's the rub with this, is really looking at when the program would start. And depending on the size of it, we would try to see, I think we're all in agreement that we want to try to keep accommodating Head Start within our facilities. But if it meant we could service our entire population, then we'd have to revisit that. Again, this is informed by stakeholder surveys. There's one other thought that I think I lost on that, but I guess we'll keep going.
And just as a reminder, Head Start's an outside program.
Yes.
That currently leases just the facility space from us.
Right. You can go to the next slide. All right, so talking about next steps is we really want to continue our work with the feasibility study and get our survey out. Continue our collaboration with NYSA because we have a million questions, and then also collecting, giving you all a chance to kind of digest what happened, and then getting some feedback to me so that we can incorporate that into our final report. The piece that I want to end on with this is that philosophically with our admin team, I think if you were to say in normal times, our support of expanding into pre-K to service the entire community is a no-brainer. However, I will speak for myself personally on this. I am very concerned that this year was a doozy, and we would like to be thoughtful and mindful and do this right, and that the start of next year may not be the right time to start this, that next year could potentially be a planning year for this. I feel strongly that that we've identified a lot of gaps within what we do now. And I'd frankly like to work on improving what we're doing before we expand farther and stretch our capacity. I want to be ready for it, and I want it done with excellence. So I know that's the intent of the leadership team, but we do recognize that this is an important part of our community. So with that caveat. Any questions for me?
Just a comment, the 9/22 start date, to my eyes, looks very aggressive.
Right.
I'm happy
That's
seeing
why it's
it
not
on,
highlighted.
I'm happy seeing it on the page. It's clear to me that that's a very aggressive and perhaps
Right.
unrealistic timeline. Yeah.
Right. And I think we're also in agreement that we don't love the idea of starting halfway through the year. It's possible. And the reason why we put it on there is because it is possible. But I think we have to sit back and ask ourselves, is that what we should be doing? Right. So I don't want to leave out what we could do, but just so that you have an idea.
I don't have any questions regarding the plan, although I'm curious, do we know what the current Head Start numbers are? We have to ask them.
Kristen, do you have any sense for how many students they have? Did you, somewhere around 12?
Yeah, I want to say I feel like I know there's 14 down there for some reason. That number's sticking in my head, but I would say somewhere between 12 and 15.
Yeah, and that's 3-4, right?
Correct. And one of the things that Lisa and I discussed is when we started our targeted pre-K, we knew that we would be taking a population away from Head Start. And so we approached Head Start and explained that to them. And because of that, they had asked that because they had overflow numbers in Hudson and Ichabod, could we let some of the Hudson and Ichabod kids attend our preschool because, the Head Start here, because we would be taking some of those Head Start kids for our pre-K. And this was at the inception of the program, and the superintendent at the time said absolutely. So while there is a 12 to 15 Head Start children downstairs, not all of them are Chatham residents. Some are Hudson residents and some are Ichabod Crane residents.
Okay. This looks great. I don't have any other comments. Anyone else on the board before we forget about this? For when should we expect to talk about this for part 2? That's summertime or
No, I think we need to move forward with getting that interest survey
surveys
out.
first? Okay.
That data point is going to be critical in understanding what our needed capacity is. What I'm hearing loud and clear, and I think the administrative team and I share the common philosophical belief that if we can design a program that doesn't displace any of our targeted kids and serves the entire interested population, that's the best scenario of all. And we'll come back to you once we have some more information to share with you as part B. And again, shout out to Dr. Rude. I see Kate here. She's done a lot of work and late work, and of course our elementary leadership, Kristen and Brett, for collaborating on putting this together for us tonight.
Thank you.
So moving on, I'm going to start my report off with some other special guests that are here. Mia mentioned it briefly, but I would like to invite, and I don't know if Ashley, you're the spokesperson or you're going to invite the whole team up, but seated behind me is, I think, most of our senior team. We have Ashley Keegan, their fearless teacher leader, and we've got Sandy Fisher and Rodney Stickles and Donna Eager and Meg Connolly. And before I turn it over to her, and not to be a spoiler, but you've heard me, I think, in the Friday report say kudos to this team who took a situation last year that I was extremely worried about, as they were, and they made lemonade and redesigned it. And I know you've heard from Ashley previously that not everything is perfect, but darn close. And I'm not going to take away her steam. So I do, but my sincere gratitude to the team and all of our students who have accomplished their presentations last Monday amidst not having bathroom facilities available in the building.
I crossed that one out of my speech, so. Yes, thank you, Dr. D'Angelo. Also wanted to shout out Mark Pearson, who couldn't be here tonight, and obviously Jen asked me specifically to make sure her name got on when I was on the mic, so hopefully she's still listening and can hear me. But yeah, I just wanted to come and talk to the board a little bit about the senior capstone presentations. They took place on Monday, February 7th. Obviously want to give a shout out to my team who is so dedicated to the students and the program, and it really showed leading up to our day. And I think despite everything, we had a really great day. I wanted to thank Beth and Chris for giving their time to us as well, going through training and coming to help evaluate our seniors that day. So I have to be honest, this was the first time in a long time that things felt normal. It's something that I really look forward to. It's something that our team really looks forward to. I don't know if the seniors look forward to it as much as we do, but I think afterwards there's a good feeling. And the fact that we were able to do it, as Dr. D'Angelo said, this year was really encouraging to all of us. As far as the day went, we did have one student who tested positive for COVID that day. And so we have rescheduled that student. We built in time for an upcoming Monday meeting so that student will be able to present. And as I mentioned before, AP students are presenting later in the year. It was really exciting to see the students come out of their rooms again. It's always just like a really positive time. Felt like they were glowing, they were light. And it was really clear that they felt accomplished and proud of their experiences throughout the whole project. And we're really hopeful that they're able to carry that confidence building into all of their endeavors, as well as all the other capstone skills that we've worked on. So as we always do, we surveyed students formally and informally to get their experience. We had them fill out a Google form, and we talked in a lot of our classes as far as getting their experience and getting a lot of constructive feedback. And we'll take that feedback and go through the data and make the revisions. It's not a perfect program. I don't know that it ever will be, but our students are really honest and they're really open with us about the things that we can work on moving forward. So we'll make the changes as we move towards next year. Coming up next for the senior team is looking into Expo Boards and Awards Night. That's something that takes place in June traditionally. It's more of a celebration. It's our trifold boards. The students get to express themselves and their time at Chatham on those boards, and then we give out awards and scholarships. As I've been telling the students all year, first we needed to get through capstones before we could think about this. So we have, and that day is really going to depend on a lot of things. It's our hope that we will have it and it will be as normal as possible. Obviously, guidelines about gathering is something, because it is a huge gathering in the gym and it's a relatively small space. So we have a couple plan Bs. We're definitely going to talk with the kids and think about what they want, work with administration to make sure that we can do that as normally as possible. And that's kind of our next step moving forward for the senior program. So that's kind of my long and short of it. I'm happy to answer any questions or give any more details if anybody has any questions or wants any more details.
Yeah.
My apologies to Jen and Mark, who aren't with us in the room tonight. I didn't intentionally want to leave you guys out. Very important parts of the team, so thank you.
No, I think that's good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Moving on to a couple other highlights for this evening. Spring sports signups started on Monday. I'm happy to report that we here in Chatham have no high-risk spring sports. So that means that currently there are no vaccination requirements for any athletes to participate. Hopefully that's welcomed news. We've heard the PreK presentation. April 2nd, Mike Chetty and I serve on a committee with the Chatham Land Conservatory and CARP, the Chatham Area Recreation Project, as well as a few community members. And they've scheduled April 2nd as a cleanup day on the pond trail. And I should also shout out to our O&M staff who helps us with that initiative. They're going to be looking at doing a cleanup, but also this year we're working with the CLC educator and our own librarian. I haven't had a chance to talk with Donna yet, but they're going to install a story walk, something that they've done in other locations. Basically, you take a children's book, somewhat usually related to the environmental surroundings. There's 3 books that are currently recommended, and they kind of pull it apart and at different stations place it along the trail. That way a family could bring their children, or we could bring elementary students there and they could walk the trail and do a story walk. And that'll be new this year, and we're really excited about that. So the cleanup day, which will be coming from an announcement very shortly in March, is slated for April 2nd, weather permitting. Also, Mia, I'm looking forward to it. I think you're coming over Thursday to discuss the student survey. The student government under Mia's leadership did an amazing job of, you've heard her on a couple occasions talk about school safety. They initiated a survey. I think you had 60 some odd responses, which is very healthy. And her and I are going to get together Thursday and discuss that, and we can put it in a format that she then can report back to the board. And based on the findings, we will design or construct some activities that will address any student concerns that are brought forward through that survey. So thank you very much for that. 2 final comments. One, we've had our share of challenges again here at the high school over the last few weeks. Just in terms of a quick update, we are still on generated power this evening. You may hear a little bit about that in the finance O&M presentation. We're still looking, we believe we're close to finding a permanent transformer, but that kind of varies by the day. We've had some recent roof challenges here. To date, we believe we've corrected those. We've had the roofers here on multiple occasions, and now that crazy weather that we got a couple of Fridays ago is gone and the roof is dry, the roofers have been able to locate some of the challenges with that roof and repair them. And then also, as previously mentioned, on the day of the senior presentations, we had an issue with our sump pumps. And I'm pleased to report that Monday, which is a great opportunity when there's nobody here in the building, we're going to have those pumps replaced, including some of the associated plumbing, to provide better reliability and redundancy of our sewage system. I know that wearing a mask in school has been a hot topic over the last few months. I don't really have an update. The mandate is still in place. We're anxiously awaiting, I think all of us are, the governor's next move as to when it will be lifted. Again, I know Matt and I have responded to a few emails this week, and going on public record that if that mandate, if either the court case is resolved or the mandate is lifted, there is no intention at this point by our understanding, Columbia County instituting a local mandate, nor based on, and I don't want to speak for the board, but the superintendent and the board not also requiring a local mandate. And that's my report for this evening. If you have any questions for my portion, and if not, then I'm gonna queue up Mike's presentation. And we'll go on to part 1 of the budget, which tonight is going to be general admin, operations, tax cap, and we have another special guest. Our library director is here tonight to share her annual report with you in the context of the budget. Anything for me before I turn it over to Mike?
Nope, we're ready for numbers, I think.
Okay, so the ever highly anticipated part 1 of the budget, Mr. Chuck, and bear with me. We're just going to cue this up, and it's all yours.
All right, so bear with me a little bit. I lost my voice last night at the girls' varsity basketball game, so I have to drink a little water. And I do wish the boys good luck. They're tipping off at 7 for the Patroon title, so that'd be wonderful to see them bring that title home.
So if you see Mike with his cell phone under the table here, you'll know what he's watching.
My son's playing, so that'll be a fun one. But so tonight, last budget season, followed similar we done in the past. We went over the executive budget, the governor's revenue last time. We met with finance last Thursday, the finance committee, to go through this first part of the budget. So general administrative and support, operations and maintenance. I have our supervisor of buildings grounds, Andy Davey, here. And then I have Jen McCreary from the public library. She's going to discuss the library report. And then I'll talk about budget increase 1.96%. So this is just the first day I'm going through the whole budget, not just the parts I'm going to show. But there's a lot of moving parts in the next couple of months. We'll solidify that number. And then also the tax cap. So that has to be submitted March 1st. I actually submitted after this meeting. We went through the, remember the cap is what the amount is by law that we're allowed to go through, and we would need 50% plus 1 vote. If we went over that number, we would need 60%. But this member tonight, this is just discussing the cap. It's not what we're going out with a tax levy at this point in time. We can make that, we're going to make that decision later. So first part of the budget, Board of Education District Clerk. So what that is the school boards, membership fees. It's the conference for board members to go to. Facilitators, district clerk, voting. The increase here is $3,500. What that is for a policy manual update. We try to do that. It's every 5 years. So that's what that was the recommendation to go through NISBA. That's the that school boards. So they're going to do that. You know, we try to go through our policies on a continual basis because there's a lot of changes. So that's the increase in that piece right there, 3,500. Chief School Administrator. So what that is, superintendent, superintendent secretary, conference supplies, NISCUS, which is the Superintendent's Council membership. And this increase, we kept all lines constant in this budget code except this is due to salary increases for those parties that I mentioned. Finance is same thing. The increase is salaries, and what that is the so my business office, we have a treasurer, accounts payable, payroll, benefits, and then it's all of the auditor, any contractual things, our 403B for our teachers and staff for the retirement. Part of my salary, remember, is in this code, and I also allocate 11% to transportation because I assist out there, and we get state aid reimbursement on that. But once again, we kept budget lines similar, flat, except for increase just per contract for salaries. Purchasing fiscal agent fee, this is $91, very small increase. What this is though is it's actually the purchasing through BOCES for our cafeteria. So we get on a general bid for ice cream, meat, and bread, and that's the increase in that to be a part of that. And then we also have Munistat as our bond filings. We have to file annually. We pay them a fee. Next line, legal, personnel, public info. Actually see a decrease of $135. Legals, Gervin and Ferlazzo. We switched over a few years ago, and that's been very cost effective. We've been studying that. They charge a retainer, and we've been staying within that retainer. We have access to call when we need, but those costs have been, compared to years past, have been lower, so that's been effective. Claims auditor through BOCES. That's the reason there's a decrease. We used to have the auditor come in once a week to audit our claims. We're a smaller district, and I noticed that we were going to try to do every other week, and that was effective, except the person that does come in needs a couple extra times a year to do the Medicaid filings because that takes some time. So it's about 2 hours each time she comes in, but we were able to save about $9,700. And I went through up to this point in time that does work and fits into the schedule. So we pulled those costs out. Public information coordinator, remember that's our person that we go through BOCES 4 days a week, do the website and all the communications. And then we saved the $9,700, and that was offset. We have a new website. We switched from BOCES, and we're going to another BOCES, and we wanted to update that. And so there was some increase in these lines, and there's increase in other lines, so that there's a slight increase overall cost for that. But we're trying to consolidate everything in one area with that, switching the website over. Operations and maintenance, once again, a slight increase. Pretty much salary again for all the operations staff and maintenance staff per contract. Nice thing is we settled our contracts this past year, all 5 of them. And we did increase a line I met with, and I'll have Andy Davey, our supervisor, speak in a second on his slide. We did increase a line for day automation since we did all those security updates with those $100,000 projects. So a slight increase, only $2,000. Remember, this is heating, electric. This is all the supplies, all the equipment for the district that we purchase here. And if we go to the, let's actually go to the operations and maintenance slide, the next one. So you can see the increase here, and then I'm going to have Andy Davey come up, and he's going to do his little presentation on his part that he supervises.
Hello, good evening, everybody. I'd like to talk about my budget and some of the year's challenges. The $100,000 project has started. It's security updates, for all the security panels in the building. The door access and the security system will talk to one another. This will help with, we can change access levels within minutes, and we can also shut off cards if someone's card was lost rather than a key. So it's really going to tighten up some of our security within the district. And they actually started that today. So I'm kind of excited about that, to get that underway. Field management. I have a 3-year program to kind of snuff out the weeds and make the turf thicker and more playable and safer for the students to play on. So we're continuing on with that. Heating, oil, and electricity. Electricity prices really didn't have a sizable increase this year. It pretty much stayed stagnant. It's probably the only thing with COVID that hasn't jumped through the roof. Heating oil is up $1 a gallon, roughly. So that's roughly a $50,000 increase from last year. We're within budget, but that's kind of why we don't drop the budget down too low, because the prices on fuel oil fluctuate so much. The maintenance plan, we've been using QAir for scheduled maintenance. We can do different things like, weekly generator checks, air handler, routine maintenance. So we can customize each piece of equipment depending on what the factory recommendations are. All the manuals for all the pieces of equipment are in the database, so we can pull those up and we can actually do the maintenance, as per the specifications from the manufacturer. The septic pumps we talked about earlier. It's going to be a total replacement of all the pumps, floats, and controls that are in the pit. Just the pipe that's leading out of the pit is going to be the same. We're going to need 2 brand new pumps, and then the 1 pump that is working, we're going to have cleaned and rebuild, and then we're going to put it down at the pump house. So in the future, if they do have to pull a pump for any reason, they can put this pump in line, and we'll always have 2 pumps, so that we really have redundancy. One of the other big items that I've been working on is the electric at the high school. Working with SEI and Engineered Solutions to get drawings and plans to the state so we can start getting funding back for this project. Look where it's been trying to source materials for the repair and some of the changes to be made. And then one of the bigger hurdles is trying to get clearance from CSX to access our pole that's up on the hill. They're a little bit tough to try to do business with. A little bit about that project. We want to try to move a pole down closer on our property and then kind of give the other pole back to NYSEG so that in the future, NYSEG can always access it because they're a preferred contractor with CSX. So that we won't have to do that hurdle ourselves and make it a little easier. And then we're going to downsize depending on availability of the transformers. Right now our transformer is probably about 10 to 20 times larger than what we need. We don't want to go too small because I look at it as a 50-year repair. So we got to leave some room for expansion. But if we go down to half size up to what we have now, we would have plenty of room for expansion. And we're just really with COVID, the challenges is the supply chain and the labor for it. So if we do half size up to the size we have now, there's no real additional labor as far as like taking away lines. We could go smaller, but then we would have to change piping and take out some wires and additional work. But really we're just trying to work with availability of these transformers. It's been very difficult to get supplies. And as far as my budget parts, that's about it. Any questions?
Just a footnote, when you hear in this presentation and the current transformer is 20 times larger than we need, that's a byproduct of the fact that when this building was built, it had electric heat and the service size needed to be that significant. Since the heating system, had been upgraded since then the electrical service doesn't need to be as significant as it was when it was originally designed.
And we still want to keep it large enough now that we have air conditioning. We have air conditioning in the building. It isn't as drastic as heat, but we're taking that into consideration. That if we do use air conditioning for the building, that it's plenty large enough.
What's the capital outlay on that? On one of those transfer, like if we had to, I'm thinking like, you're saying this is a 50-year purchase, right? What happens when 10 years from now, we find out oil is like not a good place to be? Or like 30 years from now. I'm just curious, like.
I think we work with Beth to list the property and move to a new house because replacing the heating system. No, so the capital outlay, we talked in the past, a reconditioned transformer runs about 35,000. A new one runs about 100,000.
Okay.
And so that obviously doesn't include all the materials and labor. So are we thinking a couple 100,000 when we're done?
Yeah, for this emergency project, I'm figuring close to a couple 100,000, especially running this generator with fuel every week. So
We don't have we don't have AC everywhere though, right? Is it everywhere in the
At the
building?
high school,
In the high school.
in the high
Oh,
school,
okay,
we have
yeah,
air handlers for the entire building. And then, of course, it's worth always making sure that we have an asterisk. We're putting this through New York State Education Department's facilities planning as an emergency project, because then once we incur the expense, we can put that in and we would receive our building aid back, which is roughly just about 50%.
I don't have any questions now, but I'm going to be joining you for the walkthrough tomorrow, so I'm sure I'll have more then.
okay, and I personally want to thank Andy. Last 3 weeks have been difficult with the generator, septic, roof leaks, but I want to thank him. He's been here every weekend with his staff, and so we could have the Panther Day went out without a hitch. I mean, though we had the ice storm, the basketball games got through, so we've been able to. And then the senior capstone, which was really important. I'm thrilled that went through and they could stay in this building. So I want to thank him for that. And the other piece is that field management. We didn't talk about the softball fields. He did a lot of work on the fields last fall, ordered a tremendous amount of dirt. And I'm really looking forward to that because, since I started at first, it was like concrete. And, I couldn't stand that the girls always were cut up. So I got at least water system there to at least water it. But it really was never taken, care of properly. So finally, we're going to have a field it's going to be, I think an excellent field, much better. So I'm looking forward to that. So then the next slide, I'm going to go through these pieces and then I'm going to have the library budget discussed. Central printing, that's just postage and paper that we purchase on state contract. We are having a little issue getting paper now. Actually, across the country, there's shortages. So I have been making some emergency purchases elsewhere that's not on state contract because we have to have paper, we need paper to run the district. So we have gone out and we picked up some today and we're monitoring that. Central data processing, decrease of 10,000. That is, we have our copiers on a contract for toner supplies and repairs. And then BOCES, it's the board docs, data warehouse, school tool, IEP direct, athletic software, NutriKid. So a lot of our systems items. The real increase for the decrease, or the reason for the decrease, is we moved to model schools code. We're part of model schools, and that's moved to the instructional code through BOCES. They made a change. So I'll be discussing that at the next meeting, the instructional piece, and you're going to see an increase there of 10,000. So that those just wash out. It's just a reallocation of codes per BOCES. Then we have the insurance. We go through Utica. We've had very good rates and very good history at this district. So we actually got a dividend of $10,000 this year, a payback, which was great. And then this is also the big piece of this, though, is the BOCES administrative rent and capital. As being part of the BOCES with the 21 districts, we have to pay our share based on resident weighted average daily attendance. So that covers just the administrative piece of BOCES, superintendent's office, assistant superintendent, some of the business office, their searches, superintendent searches, some of their fees for that. And then also the big piece is the retirement cost that we pay, all the districts pay to be a part of this. So on the whole, you can see the budget going up $45,259. It's one of the lower ones we've had for this administrative and operations support. It's a little over 1%. So I'm happy to see that. And if we could go to the library budget. So I'll have Jen give her report. She actually has a pretty presentation to give, some slides, but I just want to talk briefly. We went through CPLAC, our advisory committee. Remember, we have an advisory committee that we meet pretty much every other month. Happy to see John McGowan, our leader here. I've been working with him for all my 10 years here. He always supports this. So we went through this budget. If you can do the budget slide real quick.
Oh.
Then she'll go through her report. We went through the budget. You can actually see a slight decrease that's attributed to retirement rates dropping for their staff and some health insurance changes. So there was a decrease there. The one big thing that we mentioned in CPLAC, and we go through the budget a little more in depth, and then in Finance Committee, is we're looking to restructure the library, where we have, when I first came on 10 years ago, we had a librarian and then pages, and it's a civil service positions, and pages really can't do a whole lot. So Cheryl and I discussed, like, they're really doing work out of their titles. So we created a library clerk as a civil service position. We appointed the workers to library clerk. And then we discussed, and I talked with Jen and I think with Julie, we had someone there who was working 25 years, Fern Pelletier, who retired. She was we called her our library manager. So we had Jen, and then we had kind of a library manager, and then we had the library clerks. When she retired, we hired into the position as a library clerk, and we discussed this with civil service and some of the duties that need to be done at that position at the front desk, some of the new internet stuff that, the computer, the archiving. We really needed to have a little higher position. So we worked with the union and we recommended a principal library clerk. So that'll really take care of the structure of our library. We'll pay a few dollars more an hour for this position. So we discussed this in finance and CPLAC, and that's our recommendation to do this. And you can see even with the increase in salary, we're still a decrease of $1,200. So that's the budget piece. And then I'd like to, Jen McCreary is our librarian. She's done a wonderful job with programming, and especially during this COVID, difficult times in COVID, there's amazing things that happen at the library. So I'd like her to kind of give the highlights of what's going on there.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for having me. I just wanted to give you a couple highlights before I present my annual report to the state, which is a statistical report, which you'll get to review at your next meeting. But this is sort of context and stories behind the reports. It's not just numbers that you're looking at. You have a little bit more of an idea of what's been happening at the library this year. Obviously, 2020 and 2021 were not typical years at the library. So I'm going to go over some numbers on the next slide. And we'll take a look at 2019 as well, just so we can measure our progress against a more normal library year. You can see that we did take a hit in 2020, especially in the number of library visits. That's mainly because the library building was closed to the public for part of the year. We are starting to recover from that in 2021, and anecdotally in 2022, we're seeing more and more people come into the building for in-person visits and also for library programs. I do find it heartening that our library card holders have increased from year to year. And I think that speaks to the fact that people are using the library in a lot of different ways, including from the comfort of home. So if you go to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit about how we're building our collections in response to that. We are putting more funding into building our digital collections, which have become increasingly popular. That doesn't mean that we're not spending money on print books and materials that are in print. We're actually spending on par with past years in those areas, but we are working to build up our digital collections because our community discovered them during the pandemic lockdown, and now they've really gotten used to being able to access our resources with the click of a button. So those are being built up significantly. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the use of the library in terms of our circulation. Again, our print circulation did take a hit last year, but I'm happy to say that it's moving back up in a good direction in 2021. We're almost on par with our 2019 numbers for our print collections. Our physical media, DVDs, books on CD have taken a hit, but I think in contrast to that, you can see our digital collections have doubled, almost tripled in 2020 and 2021. And I think, again, that's the streaming video, the downloadable audiobooks, and ebooks that people are accessing. And if you look at the combined physical and digital collection circulation in that last part of the chart, you'll see that we are on par. We're heading right into 2019 numbers. So I'm feeling really confident that we're going to recover from these hard times that we've been going through. So in 2021, we focused on the things that I think a library does the best, keeping our community connected with library services, with free information, and also with one another. We worked really hard to develop partnerships with our local businesses and other organizations, and we did a lot of outreach in terms of getting out into the community and meeting new people. The nice thing about being a new director is that you haven't met anyone yet, so you get the chance to actually get out and go and meet folks. And we also are looking for new opportunities to serve people and always open to ideas and suggestions in that area. In January through May of 2021, our library building was actually closed to the public. So we did offer curbside services. People could pick up their books from the lobby downstairs. Our staff were also on the phone, individually calling patrons just to check in, make sure they're doing okay, especially folks that weren't on the internet and couldn't access our services, just to make sure we're connected with the library and with the community. We moved a fair amount of our programs online to Zoom. And we continue to host online programs and to offer lobby pickup. And I think both of those services are going to be with us for the long haul. That's going to be a standing service for the library now. You can go to the next slide. While our doors were closed during the pandemic, it became increasingly apparent that the library's website was the portal to the library. So it became a priority to update the website to a more mobile-friendly and accessible version. And I'm really happy to say that that was launched this fall. It seems to be working, and digital resource access, I hope, is much easier to find now. You can access, again, Overdrive and Libby, Hoopla, and Canopy are our digital platforms for various collections. We have great resources for local history researchers and genealogy researchers. We have online classes. Our popular museum pass programs, all really easy to access now through the website. You can go to the next slide. In 2021, we also brought back in-person programs and really creative ways to keep our community members safe and in contact with one another. Our summer reading programs, our weekly ukulele jams, our author and open mic events all moved outside to the library lawn. So if you saw us out there, please wave. We might be out there again this summer for part of it at least. We also were out in public parks and local conservation areas with our friends from the Land Conservancy. Go to the next slide. This slide is just a sampling of the number of organizations that the library was able to partner with this year. I'm really, really proud that this is just a portion of the people that we were able to work with this year to support local businesses and local organizations and support the library in turn. Go to the next slide. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we were able to do a number of donation drives to help our community members help their neighbors. We collected school supplies ahead of the school year. We had a year-round drive for the Chatham Area Silent Pantry. We worked with Santa Foundation for Women, and we also worked with the Columbia County Libraries and Our Community Cares on a county-wide collection to support local cancer patients. You can go to the next slide. Again, the Columbia County Libraries Association, I can't say enough good things about. It's a great organization to be part of as a new director, especially. They're great at collaborating on countywide programs. Our free passes for local museums circulated 1,493 times to residents throughout the county this year, thanks to the Ellsworth Kelly Foundation and also the Friends of the Chatham Library. We installed accessibility tools on all of our websites with county funding so that we can reach patrons with visual impairments and also folks who don't speak English as a first language. We sponsored a number of programs and other resources countywide as well. Go to the next slide. And again, I always like to get outside of the library to meet people. It's one of my favorite things to do. If I haven't met you yet, let's definitely hang out. But the pop-up library programs that we were able to bring to the community this year were one of my favorite things that we did. We brought library staff and collections to the campus of Camp Hill Ghent so that residents could check out library materials when they weren't able to visit the library. We went to the Chatham Summerfest and the Chatham Farmers Market to bring pop-up story times and sign community members up for summer reading and also for library cards and just tell them about all the great things that were happening at the library. And many thanks to the Chatham Central School District, to the Friends of the Library, to Assembly Member Dee Dee Barrett, to ARPA funding. We've been very fortunate to receive funding in order to expand our collections and support our community. This year, starting this summer, we'll be lending Wi-Fi hotspots and laptops to patrons. We have the AV equipment now to broadcast our in-house programs live to patrons who want to tune in from home or visit the library for an in-person program. And we also are in the process of training our staff to help patrons access digital resources and navigate online environments safely and efficiently. So those are all programs that are being launched this year. And again, many thanks to our community partners for those. We've also expanded our collections thanks to our friends at the Columbia Land Conservancy, Talk Read Sing Columbia, the Friends of the Library. We now have Explorer backpacks, which help patrons get outside and learn about the natural world with interactive activities and books. We have early literacy materials in both Spanish and English, and we also have at-home learning kits that patrons can check out with STEM and early literacy activities. So I would say 2021, not a bad year for a first year, like having like 6 months of it being closed. I feel like we've done a lot. I'm really looking forward to 2022. Our Library Advisory Committee has committed to a community-focused strategic planning process, which is called Turning Outward. We're really looking forward to hearing from our community about what you want to see happen in Chatham and how the library can support that. Our Friends of the Library have committed to developing a lending library of tools and toys for community members to check out, so we're excited about that. And we're also excited to offer STEM programs for local students through the Museum of Science and Innovation, and to partner with the Columbia Land Conservancy on some environmental educational programs, in addition to our digital navigator program, which I mentioned earlier. We've got a lot of grant funding coming into the library and a lot of great things on the horizon for 2022. So that's my report. If I can leave you with anything, I would just say, please come visit us. If you don't have a library card already, come and get one. We'd be so glad to set you up and to get you started using library resources. And I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Well, we have 2 library committee reps here on the board that I probably don't have any questions, but I'm curious about access to physical Spanish language reading material. Clearly there's not much in our local branch. I was a little disheartened to find that when I searched the entire library system, there's also not very much. I know the local community here, and they exist. There's a need. They're not going into the library because they can't read anything,
Right.
and they don't know how to ask for anything.
I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the things that I'm hoping will come out of the strategic planning process is the direction to serve underserved communities in Chatham. And I agree that that's a hole in our services. I think also in promoting our programs, we don't translate our promotions into Spanish. I think there are a lot of steps that we could take to better serve that community.
Okay, I'm glad that's floating around.
Yeah, it's on my mind. We're actually I wrote another grant to Talk Read Sing Columbia this past month, and it's to bring Spanish language programs for kids. But again, I think for adults also, I think we have a lot of work to do in
So,
that area.
Clearly, when you guys buy a digital book, it becomes, I guess, part of the whole Hudson Library System's collection, right?
It depends on the licensing model. So you can purchase books on a cost per serve basis, and those are only available to
really?
Chatham and Canaan patrons. Yeah. So if you're using Hoopla or Canopy, that is available for our patrons. If you're using Overdrive, it's a shared system-wide collection.
Oh, I wasn't aware. I knew about the Libby app through Overdrive.
Mm-hmm.
There's other
There's other apps.
apps
Yeah.
there.
You can expand your apps on your phone exponentially if you subscribe to all of the library's digital platforms.
I'll explore a little bit there.
Yeah, please do, and definitely check out our website because a lot of those are highlighted there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to reiterate a special thanks to Jen and John for the CFLAG committee and our board members who serve on it. Obviously, by this presentation, we're in extremely good hands, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sal. And I also have to say thank you to the school district for being so welcoming, and to Mike and to Andy and to everyone in the IT department for fielding all of my questions, and to Diane and Debbie. I really appreciate it. So thank you for having me.
And just one more thing. I was really struck and heartened to see our the actual number of books, not the visits number, right? Pretty stable through COVID.
Yeah.
So, and obviously the digital demand went up, and that's great.
Yeah, no, it's good to see. I'm happy that people are using the library. So.
Yeah. Oh, I got a couple more slides. Yeah, I'm going to go through the tax cap, and then
We're on the last page, right?
yeah, we got this in the tax cap. So this one, we finance committee recommendation. That was a very good recommendation. Kind of give a snapshot, because I do this in 3 parts. Then we have adjustments, and remember, kind of in April, we're going to approve a final budget. So this is over a few months, but just kind of the snapshot in time. If I kind of carry numbers over, I still waiting on health insurance and special education numbers. And so there's still numbers here that need to be put in, but if I just kind of looked at this point in time, carrying numbers over, you can see 1.96% increase. So that'd be for the whole budget, not just the first part that I showed, because we still have instructional and benefits and transportation to go through, but that's kind of going through the whole budget in the district. And then you can see surplus actually 86,000, but that's predicated on the state aid that we saw last meeting, and then also going at the cap of 3.47. So remember, that's a cap. We sit down and have major discussions in finance and make a recommendation later. Oftentimes we come in a little under. So that's just at this point in time, but we'll be discussing that later. If we can go to the tax cap slide then. So this is what I'm submitting to the state. And remember, this is what we're allowed to go with a 50% and 1 vote to pass. Let's see.
Mike, no matter how many times I see this slide, it's hard every time.
So as stated, as you're saying too, it's everyone thinks, oh, 2%, and that's the tax cap, but there's obviously 9 steps to get a cap, so it's really not the 2% number. There's one number in this that equals the 2%. So I'm going to go through this. Just bottom line first. If you look at the yellow, 24,054,100, 3.47964. That is our cap this year. That is higher than, I think in the 10 years I've been here, we've had one higher number than that when retirement rates went through the roof. But so that we will discuss, and I'll talk in this what's really driving that number. There's 2 factors in here I'll discuss that are driving it. But if we'll quickly go through the numbers here. So the top line, you take last year's levy, 23.245 million. And then line D, there's a tax-based growth factor. That's a state, New York State provides this number. So that's the brick and mortar building in our district. So you can see that's 1.0134. So we get to multiply that by the last year's levy to get 23.556 million. I will make a point on that. This has typically been 1.006 or 1.07 on average. So there's been more building. The state's saying there's more building in our district. So that's why that's higher. So what does that mean? If you look at that bottom number of 3.479, that's about, if you go to an average we've had in the past few years, that would be about 0.7 less, about 2.7. So that's driving that up somewhat. So if you look adjusted levy after that growth factor, 23.556, we get to, notice that we add the pilot payment in lieu of taxes. That's the old price chopper up on the hill, the senior home. They pay a pilot. So you get to take the pilot, add it to the number. Then you got to take out the capital expenses net of aid. So capital expenses are our debt service, principal and interest on our bonds for capital projects, minus our state aid. And then they also look at the BOCES debt service minus aid. We get to add those in for our district. So that's 474,512. So line K, 23.095. Then this is the line when they always say 2%. It's CPI, so consumer price index inflation, or 2%, whatever's less. So this is where 2% hits in. Now this number, typically in the last 4 years or 5 years, has been well below 2. So that's what also is driving our levy up to 3.47. But remember, the actual number for inflation was over 4%. And if you look January to January year inflation, we're at 7%. So inflation is obviously the highest it's been since I think the 80s. So that is a concern. That's why we can raise taxes a little more in theory, because inflation's so high. But we are capped at 2%, not the 4%. So you multiply the 2% inflation number by the levy, you get 23.557. Then you subtract out next year's payment in lieu of taxes, 23.543. And the last piece you add back is the capital, the debt service minus the state aid for next year's capital expenditures, the 510,000. So that's how you get the 24.054 million. That is our tax cap, which we are allowed to go with a 50% one vote to pass. And that's what I am going to submit to the state. And really the drivers, if I use last year's inflation number and last year's New York State provided growth factor, we'd be at 1.7, which is almost exactly the same as last year's number. So really the inflation and the growth have driven this number up to 3.47%. But as I stated in finance, we're going to be discussing this in depth and to make a recommendation of what we should go out with to the board in a future date. So any questions on that or any of the first part of the budget?
Just because it's late in the meeting and the acrobatics are hurting my brain a little bit. How does the 1.96 on the first slide relate to the 3.47? I know you just went through all of it, but
Yep, so the first slide, the 1.96, so I showed the first part of the budget. There's 3 parts.
yeah.
The 1.96 is, I'm taking the other 2 parts and estimating numbers right now, so this can change. So that'd be the total increase in expenditure, 1.96.
Okay.
The 3.47 on that one slide is saying if we went to 3.47 and we had 1.96, if that held, if we go to that slide.
That's the maximum we could go to.
Yes. Well, we could go over, but we need 60%,
Right.
and we don't recommend.
So, but there's
typically going
a
low.
1.5 of room there. Is that what you're saying?
Well, 1.96 is the expenses going up. The 3.47 is the revenues.
Okay.
So if I hit that revenue, and remember we went through the state revenues last meeting.
Yeah.
If I add those numbers up with the taxes,
So you're at the cap then. That's where you're
I'd be at the cap to get it,
Okay.
and that shows a surplus of actually. Right now there'd be a surplus of
No,
86,000.
I understand. Okay, I'm all caught up. So here's just in terms of financial risk.
Yeah.
They're having us look at CPI, which sounds great, except the inflation we've had over the last 2 years has been extremely lumpy across economic areas. And we've got these long-term contracts, some stuff's off contract, some stuff's on price contract. They're all going to roll over and the prices are going to go up on some commodities and other services. And how are we positioned for like 10% hikes on some of these things? Because that's what we're looking at.
So some of the areas, and that's why I met with Andy, like heating and electric. Electric were part of the consortium, so we locked in rates for a few years, which is great. But the heating costs have gone up significantly. But if you go back when I started 10 years ago, we had a heating budget, and prices were much higher. And those are lines that we didn't say, okay, the next year it's lower, we're going to lower the number significantly. We've only lowered it slowly. So we're still within target, even with the 10% for the heating. We're still within for electric. You know, the concern I have is going to be just general costs and then, health insurance.
Materials and health insurance, right? They're real.
So those are concerns, but we've had contingencies built in our budget. So, I still feel comfortable for the next year where we stand and, what we built up with our reserve plan and such to handle this. We're hoping that this is not an ongoing increase, but we're going to kind of level out soon.
So that paper example you brought up is really simple to understand, I think, because everyone can understand how paper needs to get everywhere. The suppliers aren't going to tell you that they're putting governments last, but clearly they're putting government contracts last, right? There's paper on the open market. Clearly it's available at a higher price. Do you anticipate, all the economists I'm listening to are not seeing, while they're seeing inflation fade away over the next year or two, no manufacturers are talking about dropping their prices back to where they were. What is this going to do to, how much of our budget are these material costs that are at risk here?
So quite a bit of the budget, we're still fine to be able to withstand increases. Not forever, but you're right. I don't think when you have inflation, it doesn't just go back down to old prices. Part of the paper though is more of a, there's just not a lot of, it's a supply, we have
I
supply
know, the
chain.
machines run so fast and the
So
supply
I
runs
actually was
slow,
able
but-
to secure paper. The cost was, instead of going through the state contract, which we're supposed to follow, but when we couldn't get paper, I went to Staples. They actually couldn't send me paper from the distributor, so we actually went locally and had to buy some. But the cost differential, wasn't that significant. It wasn't that much more money, so we could withstand that increase. It's just you can't go to some Staples stores and get so much. You can only get so much, right? So you're right. I mean, there's concerns about this, but like I said, I built these budgets with contingencies, and like the heating example, I didn't take the heat way down. I have to raise it. I've kept it in. I slowly took it down slowly so we could withstand these increases. So I'm comfortable with right now with the budget where we're at in our financial position to withstand the next few years.
Okay. I don't have any other questions on this section. Does anyone else? Okay.
So that concludes our brief superintendent's report for this evening.
Budget season's always long superintendent reports. We're into board committee discussion. We did cover a little bit about the library, but someone from our library committee want to report?
We did that last week.
Okay. I guess I should have pulled you out of agenda here. Okay, so on to. Just give me a moment here.
Matt, if you're referring to agenda item G, that's we pulled that out of a consensus just so that's a recommendation to
Oh, that's the
appoint
discussion. Okay.
right.
Okay. Yeah, so before we move on, item G here, we do have the actual vote down in consensus agenda. I just wanted to note here that we're recommending appointment of Sheila Stump. We talked about last time to be placed on CPLAC. So that would be effective February 16th, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. But we'll, any questions about that? Okay. All right. So we're into finance. Again, Pat, Mike popped your bubble. Anything to add? What came up? Okay. Great. So on into consensus agenda, I through K. R53, be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts consensus agenda I through K as written. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Questions or comments on the consensus agenda? I did pull that one out because I wanted to make it a public record. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So, any opposed? We're into L, items for future agenda. Board members, anything you want to table for discussion at a future meeting? Okay. So we're coming back around to second public comment. We did have a remote public comment that we moved into the open comment period. Do we still have Zena online?
She's online. You might want to ask if she's
Zena, if you raise your hand, we can bring you to the front of the line, or we can come back around. If anyone else in the audience wants to speak, all you got to do is jump on that list there, write your name down. We'll get to you in just a moment.
so she has raised her hand.
Okay, great. So we'll start with Zena. And Zena, just give us 1 second here to make sure we have the audio right. I want to make sure everyone can hear you.
It's starting to work now, I think. Okay, Zena, when you're ready, if you just unmute your microphone.
Okay, is that
We can hear
good?
you well. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm just gonna pick up where I left off. I'm not really sure why you changed the public comment around. You had mentioned that you were doing it for the public so that they would have the opportunity to vote, or to speak on items on the agenda before they were voted on. And that just doesn't even make any sense. We always had the ability to comment on the agenda. If there was something that we saw that was of interest or concern, we could speak about it because we were allowed to speak about whatever we wanted to. Now you've really limited it a lot, like a whole lot. Now we can only comment in the beginning on apparently not only just things that are on the agenda, but only things that are getting voted on. It's like Animal Farm. It's like the rules keep on changing. So I'm not sure why you tried to present it as you doing a favor for us, but you're certainly not. You're limiting our speech. You're limiting the public speech. I know in the past I commented on the DEI situation before everyone voted on it. I commented many times and it was still voted in, and other people did as well, and it was still voted. So it kind of almost, I don't think it really matters what we say before you vote. You're going to vote how you want to vote. And you're just limiting us now and trying to make it seem like you're doing us a favor, which is very disingenuous. So that's all. I just want to mention that. I think it's unfortunate, and I think that you should change it back. So thank you for listening, and yep, have a good night, everyone.
I wasn't watching. Did we have some people sign up? Great.
Heidi Hayner.
Hi, Heidi Hayner. I just have just a few quick things, and I actually I'm just going to follow up with Zena's question too. Just curious why you were going to change the order of the public comment, because as far as I've known, ever since my kids have been in school, and Bryson's 17, so 15 years, it's always been the other way. So I'm just not really sure why you would change it to the end, because it really doesn't seem like it's just making us wait to the end. It's not changing anything except for that we're not able to speak at the beginning. And then and I'm not trying to be difficult. I've got 3 kids that go to school here, and I am engaged in what happens to them because it's important to me, because they're my children. So anyway, and the other thing I wanted to touch on was the Capstone project, because I don't know if you know Bryson Hayner. He's my son, who is a very hard worker at school and enjoys school, but he came home after the Capstone project and was actually quite upset. And I told him to talk to his English teacher, and he told me that he did reach out to her, because I think it's important for you to get the feedback on the students, because again, Bryson's always been a very hard worker and he's always done what he's supposed to do in school. But he said that when he had done his preliminary run through, he was with Mr. Loomis and his classmates, so it was very comfortable. And then when he went into the classroom to do his final presentation, he said that he knew like 1 or 2 of the teachers, and then the rest of them he didn't know. He kind of felt like they were like disengaged, and he felt very uncomfortable. He was not given a clicker, which he normally would have when he's doing the presentation, so he wasn't able to move around the way that he was used to. So anyway, when he came home, he just was a little bit, he actually was worried that he wasn't going to pass. That's like how bad he felt about what he did, and he did pass. He got an 85, but now that's going to affect his English grade, which normally his grades are, very good for his overall GPA. So I just wanted to bring that up, because I think it's important that, there probably are students that are, happy with how they did, but for him, it didn't turn out to be so much that way.
With all due respect,
Sorry, I guess I should have talked to them. I should have talked to you. Sorry.
Well, not me, the board. This is the board
Sorry,
meeting.
the board. Sorry.
So I just wanted to redirect you. So thank you.
Sure, but that was pretty much it. I just think it's important for the feedback that how the kids feel about things, and moving forward to.
Absolutely. The senior team has reassured me that they're consistently looking at data, doing something better tomorrow than we did today.
Right.
And of course, you're always welcome to reach out to school district administration or to the classroom teacher, prior to airing here if you
Right.
need any additional information.
Well, I just thought since it was
Yeah.
touched on, that it was okay to speak about it is all, because
Well,
I
thank
want
you.
him, I want him to, especially with how everything is with the world today, that he's happy for his last couple months at, being a senior, so.
Understood.
you.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
comments. Scott.
Good evening. I know I'm on a time limit, so I'll get right to it. I'm here tonight as a parent and community member. I wrote it down so I'd hit the time limit. On a side note, I have taught and resided in the district for the last 24 years. So to the point, over 70% of the schools in our county, our country, have been unmasked. How come we haven't heard about the severe spread in those schools? That's pretty strange. Their learning is better, their student and staff morale is higher, and they have lower case rates. Why? Crazy. Here's my simple take on masks. If they worked, they'd be optional. Think about it. It's because they don't work that everyone has to wear them. Masking amplifies fear. Okay? Your fear-based approach has caused division and harm among our students, staff, and community. You've never polled our students, and I doubt, other than a very small number of you, you've even had a conversation with a student about it. Instead, you've sworn your allegiance to the CDC, the Department of Health, and the State Education Department in place of our students and community. Recently, you had a chance to take a stand when other schools started taking a stand. But instead, we just signed a letter for a pathway to normalcy. What did that accomplish? Answer is nothing. There are schools around the state who have stood up and made masks optional. Have you contacted those schools to see how it's going? We know that answer. We're in the 24th month of disrupted childhood and learning, and we've done nothing but follow the science. But if science was never questioned, we'd still be drinking cocaine and smoking the cigarettes our doctors recommended. That's a semi-joke. Leadership requires unpopular responsibility. It's always easier to support something that is popular and comfortable than to stand for what's right. Our country was founded on the principle of standing for what's right. Maybe we need to revisit that lesson. Here's the science we should follow. Follow the science that says a real vaccine doesn't require booster shots every 3 to 6 months. Follow the science that says a virus with a 99.9% chance of survival isn't a reason for lockdown, quarantines, mandates, or restrictions. Real science says masks don't curb viral infections. Common sense says if our political leaders and celebrities, many of who are vulnerable, can walk around coughing, shaking hands, hugging, and be maskless, there is absolutely no reason for our 5 to 18-year-olds to mask up and physically distance and not be allowed to play sports. It's completely anti-science and being done out of stubborn refusal to admit you were wrong. Are any of you aware of the FDA finding in admissions today? Probably not. But you get to make those decisions on our kids' physical and mental health. Do you understand that in a few weeks, the CDC and Department of Health are going to state that they only recommended but didn't require this? And then the liability is going to fall on you? We understand that you'll claim you didn't know better or you're being virtuous, but you did because these people told you so. And they gave you the data and you ignored it, and you're still ignoring it. At this point, it is unthinkable to think that you can continue to force our students to wear masks. You've followed the science for 2 years, but now when the science says masks don't work, you no longer follow it. Make it make sense. There's no public health evidence to support the draconian mandate, but in fact, there is public health evidence to the contrary. Masking interferes with learning and socialization and is unnecessary. On top of that, there's a study in the Journal of Infectious Medicine that 70% of masks tested contained fungal contamination. That's what we want for our kids. Thank you for not doing your research. And finally, for those you think masks are to protect the immunocompromised children, the Journal of Infection released a year-long study at the end of last month that stated immunocompromised children and young people are at no increased risk of severe COVID-19. No risk. Sadly, you won't see it on the mainstream media because they're sponsored by Pfizer and encouraged by the politicians who bought all the stock in Pfizer and Moderna. Our students and parents have waited patiently while you forced and coerced them into taking part in a failed vaccine experience, which cost many of our bright young student athletes the opportunity to participate. In a recent meeting, you shared stats on the unvaxxed staff and cases.
Scott, you're finishing up, right?
When can we
No,
expect?
you can't cede time.
When can we expect the stats? I'll wrap it up for you, Matt.
Thank you.
When can we expect those stats, Matt? Here's the point. For all the fearful leaders in our district, if we draft the mask mandates too soon, nothing will change. Nothing. The pandemic will take the exact trajectory either way. However, kids will learn better, students, staff, and administrative morale will take a turn for the better, and people will probably come back to being nice to each other. As sure as I sit here, I know this speech, like all the others, will fall on your deaf ears, and nothing will get done. But I can sit here proudly with the people here, knowing we represent the best interests of our children, students, athletes, and community. Can you say the same?
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you coming out.
I just want to say, I was going to say thank you to, you for putting the hope for our spring sports. Matt, I just find it very rude that you give us the privilege for parents and children to speak in reference to our kids and what's going on, and then you interrupt somebody who's giving their heart and soul into how we have been fighting for the last 2 months for our own children. We have sent you emails that we get copy and paste, same emails sent to each other. It is heartbreaking that we have to do this when so many other places are open and all we get is we have to wait for the governor to give us permission. Did the governor give you permission to mandate a vaccine? Who did that to our kids? You did. Why is it that you can't now fight for our kids to not wear a mask? I have a little idea. For the next however long it takes her, how about we put our kids in a restaurant setting? Let them bring drinks and snacks to their desk. They walk in, they sit at their desk. It's like a restaurant. They can take their masks off. They're 6 feet apart. Why could we do that in restaurants? Why can't kids take their masks off while sitting at a desk when they're 6 feet apart? And if they have a drink or snacks, shouldn't they be allowed? Because everybody else was. And yet our kids are 99.98% survival, and they're the ones suffering the most. I hope you listen to every word that he said, because it is factual data that you guys are not looking at. You're just complying and doing what you're told and not fighting for our kids. And it's really disappointing that nobody is fighting for our kids.
Thank you, Sharon. Do you have anyone else? Taylor?
Hello, my name is Taylor Benoit, and I just wanted to mention that I would appreciate if we could have open comment in the beginning of the meeting, as it's difficult when it's pushed to the end, but there's no set time, especially as a student, my time is limited, and we should be encouraging student participation and not discouraging it. So we have been attending these meetings since the 6 superintendents of Columbia County, along with the guidance of the Columbia County Department of Health, imposed their own COVID-19 vaccine mandate for high-risk sports. My mother made a plea last week asking our superintendent to reevaluate the mandate as the virus has changed, as well as the positivity rate. This has been an everyday topic in our home. Basketball is my go-to sport. As a 9th grader, sports are my life, and you are taking away that opportunity. Your response, the season is almost over and it would not make sense. Even one game would mean the world to me. I would have loved to put on a jersey on for Monday night's game in Hudson. Please do not double down and not acknowledge the change in the virus. Let me wear a Chatham jersey and be a part of the team for sectionals. I know Coach Rollison will welcome me on his team in a heartbeat. As always, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.
Good evening. I just wanted to give the board, I hate the feedback there. Thank you. I just wanted to give the board a quick update on the robotics team. The robotics team has been meeting every day for at least 3.5 hours a day. We're starting to meet on weekends. Our competition is the March 14th through 16th, so right after the school musical, which you should all go to because their kids are doing a great job working on that as well. The robotics team this year, I think I mentioned it at an earlier meeting, we're sort of in a rebuilding year. So I have a lot of freshmen, and it's really exciting to see them learning how to use tools for the first time and learning how to wire, and they're breaking and making chains. I do have some video. I think I'm going to get on the agenda at some point in the future so I can show you some video of what the kids have been working on. But I just want to extend an invitation to all of you to please come down to the shop any afternoon and see what the kids are working on.
When is the competition?
The competition is March 15th and 16th, and it's at it's changed now. It's not the Times Union Center. It's the
MVP
Center. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. Other than I know there's 44 teams competing, and teams are coming from all over the world and from a lot of the states, because the competitions used to be held in colleges, so there'd be a lot of different competitions. So you'd had a lot of opportunities, and the colleges aren't doing them. So now they're looking at these big arenas, and so there's fewer of them. So the teams with the resources are traveling distances to go to these competitions. So we'll be up against a lot of stiff competition, but the kids are getting excited. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Does sound like we're lucky to be close to Albany here.
Sandy, have you renamed the team, or is that staying the same?
It's still Artemis. Yeah.
Cindy will be back during agenda planning. I'll put forward a request to have her on the agenda for March 8th.
Great. Do we have any more online hands? And do you have anyone else on your sheet? This is last call for anyone.
There are no online.
Okay.
hands up.
So that's the conclusion of public comment. I do anticipate the need to have a brief executive session to talk about matters that pertain to a specific individual. So we are going to move into executive session, and I do not anticipate a need to return to open session. So this is the end of the public meeting. Thank you for joining us. Well,
second.
Oh, it's about to get there.